The term free range, when applied to chickens, can be a bit of a buzzword or a marketing term. You hear free range chickens, free range eggs. It's sort of set up as the ideal situation for chickens to live in or something to aim for. And I keep my chickens in a free range situation. But today we're going to talk about why having free range chickens is not all it's cracked up to be. First thing that can be a problem when you're free-ranging your chickens is all the chicken poop. Chickens poop between 12 and 15 times a day per chicken. So if you have more than a handful of hens, that adds up to a lot of poop. I have between 25 and maybe 40 chickens at a time here. And oh my goodness, that is a lot of poop. Do the math on that. That is a lot of poop coming out of chickens every single day. So that's a big consideration. If you have your flock on natural surfaces like grass and soil, or you have a composting chicken run with wood chip or some other kind of organic material down, it might not be a really big deal because the poop's going to just kind of decompose naturally into the ground. But if you have a lot of hard surfaces, if you have pathways or gravel, if you have back decks or front decks or concrete, that poop's just going to sit there, and that can add up to quite a lot of poop. So really think about your situation and how many chickens you're going to have before you decide that free range is the right system for you. Now, it is true that chickens do about half of their pooping at nighttime. So half of those 12 to 15 poops in a 24-hour period are going to be collected at nighttime in the chicken coop. But that still leaves quite a lot of poop going out in the daytime onto the ground. So if you have a relatively large natural surface, so grass or soil, garden, wood chip, then maybe if you don't have too many chickens, that poop is going to naturally decompose down and it's not going to be a big issue for you. But that is also going to depend on the weather that you're having. If it's raining quite a bit, the poop is going to go away pretty quickly. But if it is quite dry, then the poop might sit there for quite a while, not being able to be decomposed by natural systems. So do keep that in mind. But if you do have a lot of hard surfaces in your backyard, then free ranging is probably not going to be a great idea for you because you're going to spend a lot of time and use a lot of water cleaning up after your chickens because you need a lot of rain to clean chicken poop off concrete. Trust me, I know you need a lot of rain. So if you don't have a lot of rain happening on a consistent basis, you're going to be out there with a hose cleaning your paths and decks and everything else all the time. And that's not really a great use of your time. Lots of poop also means lots of fertility, which can be a great thing, but it can also be very overwhelming. Because as your chickens are cruising around, are depositing little blobs of fertilizer everywhere they go, and the grass or whatever plants are that they're depositing that fertilizer on are going to love that and grow fast and grow lush. So your lawn might go crazy. You might be out there mowing it all the time. So it is something to keep in mind. You need to think about how you're going to manage the fertility. On the flip side of all that fertility coming into your landscape, making your plants grow really quickly, is that if you have too many chickens constantly being given access to a certain space, they will decimate it. So stocking rate is very, very important because chickens have scratchy little feet and they will turn any beautiful, lush landscape into an absolute desolate wasteland if there are too many of them for too long in a space. even if you have the right number of chickens in the right size space and they're not going to decimate all the plant life in the area, they're still going to have their spots that they are going to take ownership of, and they're going to do what they like in those spots. So they might dig up their favorite sunniest spot in your lawn to make their dust bathing area, or they might have their favorite spot for hanging out in the sunshine where they spend a lot of time and the grass and plants in that area aren't going to be able to sustain the traffic. So even if everything is perfect in terms of stocking rate for the space, you're still going to have a little bit of destruction happening in your backyard. Now, going back to when I mentioned those scratchy chicken feet, well, chickens love to scratch. It's pretty much their favorite thing to do in the whole wide world. Which means they will come for your vegetable gardens. They will scratch everything out of them, which can be a force for good. They are extremely effective at clearing down weeds and old crops at the end of a season and preparing a garden bed for springtime planting. They're fantastic for that, and I use my chickens to help me in my garden. They do a huge amount of the work for me, but I have to keep them out of there in the growing season, or I wouldn't be able to grow anything, because they will decimate anything I put in the garden. Pretty much nothing is safe from them, even planting a tree, unless it is already quite big. Even if I go and plant a tree, I still have to protect that tree from them coming and scratching up at the roots of the tree if it's just gone in and there's soft soil around it. So do keep that in mind. If you've got chickens that can freely access all the parts of your property whenever they feel like it, you're going to have to take some extreme measures to protect the things that you don't want them to destroy. So in my gardening system that I run here, which runs along with having free-range chickens that pretty much always have access to the whole backyard, so that's how I'm doing things, I have to protect every individual growing space from the chickens, which can be quite a lot of work, and you do have to have enough budget in your gardening budget to account for crop protection, well, or whole garden bed protection, actually. So I tried initially to keep the chickens in a run, and I originally had numbers like a normal person would have, just a handful of chickens, and that was okay. But every so often, a hen would get out, beeline for the gardens, and rip everything out. So in the end, I decided that I would have to protect the gardens, and that has worked really well. And as my flock numbers have increased and it has become not possible to keep that many chickens in a run, it has worked really well for me to have the gardens individually protected. Because not only does it protect them from chickens, it also protects them from cats coming and pooping in the garden beds. It protects them from poo geckos, which we have here, which are kind of a crazy swamp kind of bird that likes to come and also rip up gardens. And if you were somewhere where you had rabbits or something like that that would come and get in your garden, well, it protects your gardens from that too. So I'm okay with having to individually protect every single one of my garden beds, but that is something to keep in mind. Chickens and gardens go together really, really well, but it does take quite some planning to make them play nicely together. You may have heard the saying, chickens always come home to roost, and that is true. They will come home at the end of the day to roost, but during the day, they can wander quite far. Now, how far will depend on how far they can actually go. If you have a contained backyard, then hopefully they're just going to stay in your backyard. But if they have wider access to less controlled spaces, they might decide to go on quite some adventures, and they can go quite far. My hens usually stay quite close to where their run is and their coop is. They don't go very far on their own. But if my rooster Astarion is feeling adventurous, he will take them on elaborate adventures out into the orchard, which they are allowed to go out into. I have an opening in the fence for them to be able to go out in the orchard. The hens don't go very far out there, and But Astarion likes to go on epic adventures. He will take a whole group of hens and they will just go off on an adventure for maybe up to 1 kilometer away. I'm not 100% sure, but they do go for quite a way. And that puts them at risk. It puts them at risk of predator attacks. They can't be closely monitored by any of the humans in the environment either. They're taking themselves out into a risky situation. And your appetite for risk might not be that high. You might want your chickens to be contained in a more safe environment. In my situation here, the chickens have access to the backyard. They are blocked from coming into the front side of the property. So from that perspective, they are protected from being in the way of any vehicles going in and out of the property. They're not causing problems with sort of access to the front of the house, and they are being kept away from the majority of the hard surfaces. They can't go and poop on driveways. They can't get onto the front deck and poop outside the front door, so that is contained into the backyard. However, we did decide to put up a back deck for enjoying the sunshine in the backyard in the summertime, and we had to put a fence around that back deck. Otherwise, the chickens would have decided that we made them a fabulous new hangout spot. They would have hung out on the deck whenever they felt like it and pooped everywhere. So building the deck had an added cost of putting a fence around it. So we essentially had to fence ourselves, the people, onto our deck in order to keep it poop free. So there are some caveats to free range being the best chicken keeping system. There is quite a lot of pooping that happens in my backyard, and we do have to watch where we step. That is a thing. So there are sacrifices to having a system like this. Now, I don't necessarily think that free range system is the absolute best system, but in my situation here, where I want to have more chickens than I can comfortably house just in a run, then that is a system I have decided to go with. I am able to let my chickens use the extra space in the orchard that is right bordering on my property, so that gives me more latitude to have more chickens than perhaps I would otherwise be able to have. So the chickens are not decimating the entire vegetation of the backyard. Everything's okay from a stocking rate perspective there. But if I was going to have them in a run system, a more controlled system, which is not the worst idea, I would only be able to have about 10 chickens in my space here. And I wanted to have more than 10 chickens. So that's the system that I'm stuck with. But you don't have to have free range chickens for your chicken flock to be fully happy and healthy. So let's talk about the other options for keeping chickens. Your first option is to have a large chicken run that you set up and your chickens live there permanently. And you got to make sure that it's really big and you have the correct number of chickens for the space. The more space, the better. But that is a really good option for meeting chicken needs in terms of space and things for them to do. You're going to make the run really awesome. Bonus if you can have some trees and shrubs in the location that you pick to put your chicken run in. But you're going to be meeting your chickens' needs. They can be perfectly happy in a large run. So that is your first option. Your second option is to have a chicken run, hopefully big, but it could be a bit smaller, where your chickens hang out most of the time and you let them out into the backyard just for a couple of hours in the evening. So they're going to come out, they're going to get their free range time, they're going to be able to scratch around and do their chickeny things, and then they're naturally going to just go back to the run, to go to their coop, to go to sleep at nighttime. So you don't have to be chasing chickens around trying to get them back in their run. It's a really good way to manage the system working with natural chicken behavior. You just let them out a couple of hours before you know they're going to go to bed. They get their time. You reduce the amount of damage that they can cause, and then they're just going to take themselves to bed. This system is a really good choice, and it is the system that I used to use back when I had a normal number of chickens. I had, I can't remember now, it was so long ago, but I had around 7 chickens, and they would be in their coop and run situation where they stayed most of the time, and then in the evenings I would let them out to forage around and eat grass and do chicken things, and then they'd take themselves back to bed. Great way to manage your space without letting the chickens completely destroy it. So if your backyard is on the smaller side, I would actually recommend using a system where your chickens don't always have access, because they will do quite a lot of damage. You can overgraze, overstock your area by letting them have access to it all the time. The final option is the one that I like best, and it is actually the option that I would use myself if I had fewer chickens. And this system is to have a fixed permanent run and coop, where you ideally set up your composting chicken run system in that fixed permanent run. And then you have a series of runs that your chickens can come out to, so you can rotate them around the yard. Now this might be with portable fencing that you set up for each little section, or maybe you permanently fence it in and you have just a little gate system. There's all sorts of different ways to set it up to work for your space. But this is a great system because you can ensure the safety and the control and containment of your chickens for their main period. And then you can let them out at the right time of year, at the right time of day, into an environment that you want them to come out into to do a task for you. Maybe that's pest management, maybe that's mowing your lawn for you, into a controlled area where they're not going to overgraze it. So they might come out for a few hours a day for a month into one section, and then you move them to the next section, and so on and so forth. So that's a really great way to get the benefits of chicken feet and beaks in your backyard without allowing them to just rampage around everywhere and get into mischief. So a rotating run system attached to a permanent run is what I think is the best system for getting the most out of your chicken flock and for your chickens to still be able to live their absolute best chicken lives, being able to express all of their natural behaviors. Keeping a free-range chicken flock is not necessarily the dream lifestyle. There are some major trade-offs, and it is absolutely not for everybody. Choose the chicken keeping system that works for you, for your property, for your lifestyle, and for your tolerance of chaos.